Okay, today we're going to be looking at section 4.2, which is talking about congruent triangles, or introducing us to congruent triangles. So you need to write down these two vocab words for your notes in 4.2. Corresponding parts really just means that we're talking about the matching parts, or the ones that correspond to one another. So congruent polygons, or in our case we're going to be looking at congruent triangles a lot, all of the parts of one polygon are congruent to the corresponding parts of another polygon. So basically all the angles that match should be congruent and all the sides that match should be congruent. So you can ask the sub to pause here if need be. So if we look at an example of what that actually means, we've got these two triangles here that are going to be congruent. So triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. That statement right there is called a congruent statement, and at least two problems on your homework are going to ask you to write down a congruent statement. All that means is that you're just going to write one figure is congruent to another. When you do that, you need to make sure that you put the corresponding letters in the right order. So you'll notice that angle A has 3 arc marks, and so does D. So that means when you talk about triangle ABC, you need to make sure that A is in the same spot that you put D in the other triangle name. So since A and D are congruent, and I put A first in the first figure label, A and D both need to be first, so I need to also put D in the first spot. B and E are congruent, so they need to be in the same position. C and F are the same, so they need to be in the same position. Okay, and then a couple problems on your homework are going to ask you to label the congruent parts. So you need to label the congruent angles. So if we look at this picture, we did that here. A is congruent to D, B to E, and C to F. And then sides, again, if you didn't have the picture right in front of you, you can do that by just looking at the congruency statement. So we know that AB, since that's the first and second letter, that should be the side congruent to the first and second letter in the second label. So that would be D and E. And again, B and C, that's the second and third letter, that side will be congruent to E and F. And those should be in the same positions as B and C. Alright. So again, you can have the sub pause or go back if you need to. The third angle theorem you do need to write down as part of your notes. Okay. This is on page 293, I think, if you for some reason can't read my writing. So the third angles theorem says that if we've got two angles in one triangle congruent to two angles in another triangle, then their third angles have to be congruent as well. So this kind of comes from the 180-degree sum theorem, which says, if you remember from Thursday, that all three angles in a triangle have to add up to 180. So if we have two angles being the same in those two triangles, that means their sum is going to be the same. And if we subtract that number, whatever it is, from 180, we should get the same number, and that's what A would have to be, and that's what L would have to be in this picture. So in this example, we just see that C and K are marked as being congruent, B and J are marked as being congruent, so we know that their last pair of unlabeled angles also need to be congruent. Alright, and then let's look at one example. So this is similar to your, let's see, next 4 problems in your homework. I believe it's like 13 through 16 or something like that. So we are told in the instructions that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DFE. And then we want to use that information to find X and Y. Well, if we know that the triangles are congruent, we know that their corresponding or matching parts are going to be congruent. So what we can do is take the important parts of the triangles that are labeled and set them equal to each other. So if we look over at triangle DFE, we see that we have the 8y minus 5 is angle F, and 2y plus x is side FE. So those are the important parts. So angle F needs to be set equal to its corresponding part in triangle ABC. Now on this problem, it's pretty straightforward because the triangles are set up the same way, like they're both placed on their largest third side. But if DFE was positioned in a different way, maybe it was rotated 90 degrees or something, it might be harder to figure out what angle goes with what. So again, you get that from looking at the label. or the congruency statement above here. So since F is the second letter, it is going to be equal to the second letter in the first triangle, which is B. So we're going to set F's equation equal to B's measurement. So in this case, we're going to do 8y minus 5 and equal that to 99. Okay, and we're going to solve that by adding 5 to both sides. So we'll get 8y is equal to 104, and from there you can divide by 8, which gives us y equals, let's see, that's 113. Okay, now the reason we solved the for y first is because if we look at our second equation or expression, 2y plus x, that has 2 letters in it. So we need to figure out what y is before we can even solve that. So now that we know what y is, we can take that. So instead of putting down y, I'm going to put down 13. Add that to x, and that is on side FE. So if we look at our congruency statement, FE is the second and third letter, so it must be equal to the side that has the second and third letter in the first label, so that's BC. And in this case, it's really easy to see that that's the 38.4. But it might not be so easy if they are positioned differently. So then we just solve that like we normally would, so we get 26 plus x equals 38.4. And when we subtract 26 from both sides, we should get that x equals 12.4. Okay. Alright, now you should be able to work on your homework, which the sub should have put on the board or will do so now.